Hello, everyone, and happy today. So today we begin looking at the muscular system. And when we reference the muscular system, we're focusing on the skeletal muscles, those muscles that are attached to our bones and move our body. So looking at an overview of the muscular system, we do acknowledge there are three types of muscle. There's the skeletal muscle attached to bones that move the body around. There's cardiac muscle found in the heart, and then there is smooth muscle that lines hollow organs. We've talked about the types of tissue found in these different types of muscle back in chapter 4 or chapter 3, but we'll delve into the other types a little bit more at a later time. So, focusing on skeletal muscle. The cells in skeletal muscle are different than cells we typically think of. A lot of times when we think of cells, we're thinking about sort of things that are circular or globular, or like plant cells. We think of them as being sort of boxy or rectangular. The cells in skeletal muscles, are long cylinders. Okay, so muscle cells are also called muscle fibers. So when we look at this image here, there is the muscle fiber, the muscle cell. It's actually a long cylinder filled with proteins that contract. Okay, so the cells are structured differently. Again, just think about how you have the cells being these long cylinders filled with protein rather than like circles or rectangles. Muscle cells do one thing: they contract. And because they are attached to bone, when they contract, they can move those bones or move the skin over the bones. Now, this tissue is striated or striped. It's pretty faint, but you can sort of see here in the illustration that you have some stripes in there. We'll get into what those stripes are about later in the week. But skeletal muscle is also voluntary, meaning you have conscious control over it. So those are just sort of the basic features of skeletal muscle. Now, muscle cells are necessarily wrapped in a lot of connective tissue. So here you see an individual muscle cell, and it will contract. It can contract, but what happens is that if it contracts, it can tear the membrane of the muscle. It can rip the muscle cell. So muscles are actually wrapped in many layers of connective tissue. There are three layers of connective tissue you'll need to be aware of here. The first is the endomysium. Endo means within or inside, and myo means muscle. So the endomysium is connective tissue that wraps around a single muscle cell. Okay, so you can see each of these muscle fibers here, each of these muscle cells is wrapped or enveloped in some connective tissue. Now, you can have multiple muscle cells wrapped in another bundle of connective tissue, and that's called the perimysium. Peri, you think of like perimeter. So a bundle of muscle cells is wrapped in the perimysium. Now, what we do is call that bundle, it gets a name, it's called a fascicle. So the fascicle is the bundle of muscle cells all wrapped up in this connective tissue, the perimysium. And then the epimysium is the connective tissue that wraps around multiple bundles of muscle cells. So again, endomysium on the inside wraps around one cell. The perimysium wraps around a bundle of cells, making up a fascicle. And then multiple fascicles are wrapped in epimysium. Epi means upon, right? So the epimysium surrounds all of that. So you have three layers of connective tissue wrapping individual cells, bundles of cells, and bundles of bundles. Now, what can happen then is the muscle cells will stop, which is what we see in this illustration here, where the sort of the red stops, but the connective tissue continues on. That connective tissue can then form tendons or aponeuroses. Okay, so again, when all that connective tissue extends beyond the muscle, then we either refer to it as a tendon or an aponeurosis. Tendons, you can feel a tendon in the front of your biceps on the front side of your elbow. So if you flex your biceps, you can feel that tendon that connects your biceps down into the radial tuberosity in your forearm. Or you can feel tendons back behind your knee. If you contract your hamstrings, you can feel those tendons behind the knee. But tendons are these narrow cords. So what they do is they narrow when the connective tissue, or when the tendon crosses over like a joint. So you have the muscles stop, the connective tissue extend on in a narrow cord as it crosses a joint, and then it attaches to a bone. Now we'll contrast this with aponeuroses. Aponeuroses are sheets of connective tissue. You have a muscle in your forehead called the frontalis. You can raise your eyebrows. Well, it connects to the parietal bones at the top of your skull by a flat sheet of connective tissue called an aponeurosis. So you can sort of put your hand at the top of your forehead and raise your eyebrows, and you can feel the muscles contract, but then eventually it just extends into connective tissue that attaches to your skull. Or your abdominal muscles. Your abdominal muscles have aponeuroses that feed down into your pelvis and attach those abdominal muscles to your pelvis. All right, we will look at smooth muscle for just a moment here. Smooth muscle lacks stripes or striations. When you look at it under a microscope, you don't see any stripes, and it's involuntary, so you don't have conscious control over it. It does line the walls of hollow organs like the stomach or the intestines, and they're said to be uninucleate, so they have one nucleus, and they have the sort of spindle shape where they're wider in the middle and they taper on the ends. The types of contractions produced by smooth muscle: slow, sustained contractions. Think of muscles in the intestine contracting to push things along the intestinal tract, or the uterus having long, sustained contractions to help push a baby out during childbirth. Cardiac muscle, it's only found in the heart. It is striated, so you see these stripes. It's involuntary, so you don't have conscious control over when it contracts. Its cells are interesting, though, because they are branched. So since they split, there's a sort of interconnectedness between cells that allows sort of rapid communication between the muscle cells, so they can contract in unison. Let's see. Another feature of cardiac muscle is intercalated discs. Intercalated discs are the thicker lines that we see here. They're like walls between cells that have holes in them. So those holes in the walls allow ions to pass more rapidly between cells, and again, it helps the muscle cells in the heart contract at the same time. In terms of the contractions, the cardiac muscle is autocontractile. It'll actually contract on its own without signals from the nervous system, and we can say it contracts at a steady pace, sort of a rhythmic pace. And it is controlled by certain types of cells called pacemaker cells. We'll get into that a lot more in the cardiovascular unit. Okay, our last topic for today is muscle function. So what do muscles do for us? Let's see. Well, muscles allow us to respond to changes in the environment. So whether it's an internal environment or the external environment, it allows you to react to that and move your body, right? Muscles also allow us to express emotion. Muscle normally attaches to bone and moves bone, but muscles also attach to your skin in your face and will contract to express emotion. Happy, sad, okay, surprised, whatever the case may be. So muscles in the face allow us to move the skin to express how we feel. And finally, in this slide, not only can muscles move the body, like skeletal muscles move the body, smooth muscle and cardiac muscle can move materials through the body. So cardiac muscle can contract and force blood through the body, and then smooth muscles can contract and move like food through your digestive system. The last slide for today is looking at muscle function. So we looked at some of the early other functions of muscle in the previous slide. In this slide, we have a few more things that muscles can do. Muscles can stabilize joints. So you think about your shoulder, that glenoid fossa is really shallow, but muscles help stabilize that joint in our shoulder or between our vertebrae. We have all those joints between all the different vertebrae, and the erector spinae muscles can help hold our spine upright. Let's see, muscles, They need a lot of ATP to contract, so they have a fairly high metabolism, so muscles can generate heat. That's why people might shiver if they're cold. You get that rapid muscle contraction and increased metabolism helps you produce heat. Muscles can form valves. Sphincters are muscles that are arranged in circles, and when those muscles contract, then they basically close. So you like have sphincters on either side of your stomach. We know our stomachs are filled with acid and can dissolve tissues. So we have sphincters on either side of our stomach to help regulate the passage of materials through the stomach and sort of keep stomach contents where they need to be. And we have intrinsic eye muscles that do things like dilate and constrict pupils. All right. So that's it on muscle function. If you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, I hope you have a great day. Thank you.